All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We are over here in Boston, Massachusetts, and my name is Alexandra Kessler, or Alex, and we're really excited to talk to you guys today about the 7 common mistakes that we typically see sellers make with Amazon-sponsored products. So, like I said, my name is Alex Kessler. I am on the customer success team here. I am also joined by my colleague, Kathleen.
I'm Kathleen Foley on the customer success team as well.
We have a few special guests in here as well.
Hey, this is Will Johnson. I'm head of brand here at Teikametrics. Really excited to be here.
Hey everyone, my name is Mike Indegaro. I lead the agency and partnership program here at Teikametrics and excited to be here and talk more about sponsored products.
Great. So just to start things off, we'll give you a brief agenda. So we're going to briefly provide just an introduction to sponsored products. And we like to, make these webinars as engaging as possible. We'll be launching a few polls for you guys to participate in today during the next hour or so. And keep in mind, these are all completely anonymous. We just want to engage with you guys as much as possible as we sit around this round table here up in Boston. And we're going to just briefly, like I said, start off by giving a brief intro for sellers who might not be super familiar with the platform, but then we're just going to dive on into it and discuss in detail the most common issues that we see sellers make with their sponsored product campaigns and the best way to rectify those. And as always, we're going to end with a Q&A session. So during the presentation, we also have quite a few members of our team listening in. Everyone here eats, breathes, sleeps, eats Amazon. So any questions you might have during the presentation or during the webinar, please use the little chat function in the GoToMeeting control panel, and you can go in there and ask any questions, and our team will be waiting in the wings to answer.
Yeah, so this is Will again. One of the big things that we want you guys to get out of these webinars is the actual actionable steps to, finding the problems within your business and then having the tools to actually solve them. So we started with our first 7 goals. So this is really what we want you guys to get out of the webinar. It's our way of basically saying, if the webinar is a success, if by the end of it we get through all of these goals. But Alex is going to go right through those, and we're excited to share them.
Sure, yeah. So first and foremost, right, we want you to understand how to successfully structure your sponsored product campaigns. That's a huge mistake that we see people kind of, not focus a lot of their attention on, but could actually solve for the majority of problems that we end up seeing. We can briefly run through these, but we want you to learn from your own data. We want you to use that data to make informed business decisions as an Amazon seller, understand those best practices for keyword match types, how you should be maintaining profitable campaigns, the logic behind, testing the optimal ad placement for your products, and then also just setting correct expectations for sponsored products. So, Kathleen, why don't we just briefly go through the basics of SP?
Right. So most of you are at least familiar with sponsored products, and that's why you're here. But it's a pay-per-click advertising platform for Amazon sellers, meaning you only pay when somebody clicks on your ad. So sponsored products enables you to promote your products with keyword targeted ads that appear in highly visible placements on Amazon.
Right. So where are those placements exactly?
Right. They're usually one of 3 places, either the top of the page, the side of the page, or on a competitor's product listing.
Right. And that's just so valuable these days because, as everyone knows, Amazon has no barrier to entry and the marketplace is becoming increasingly saturated. So any additional marketplace real estate you can get as a seller is just so beneficial in so many ways to growing your business using Amazon's platform.
Right, and if you put in the time to understand sponsored products and run your campaigns properly, they can help you sell through inventory faster as well as increase your organic sales rate.
Right. So before we really jump into the big picture and the first mistake, we really quickly wanted to kind of gauge, and we're going to launch a poll right now. Why are you guys running sponsored product campaigns? I'm going to launch that right now, and you guys can just submit your answers. We will let you guys answer for a few minutes. I'm really quite curious. And the options are to drive incremental revenue, to move stale inventory, to launch new products, to get your products on page one, or are you not even running sponsored products at this point? And everybody, we have a brand new visitor in the room, our CRO and typical MC, Andy Coughlin.
Hi, everybody.
Visit.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm happy to be here. How are things going thus far?
Good.
Great, launching the first poll. Over 50% of people have voted. We'll give you guys a few more seconds to trickle in, and then I'll close it and share the results. All right, 3, 2, 1. I'll close it, and then let's share the results. Okay, really interesting. The number one reason that the majority of sellers said that they were running SP was to get their products on page one. And then number two was to drive incremental revenue. 5% of you aren't running sponsored products at all, so hopefully today will help you get started. And let's go ahead and I'll hide the results and we'll kind of move forward. So yeah, this is just super interesting to me, those results, because people that aren't even running sponsored products at all, the one of the biggest and I would say arguably most important mistakes that people make comes right at the beginning. And that's when sellers are actually creating the sponsored product campaigns and are structuring them. And if your campaigns aren't structured successfully, right, it's almost impossible for you to see any return on your investment.
Right, we see a lot of our customers come in with campaigns that are just all of their products grouped into one campaign, or sometimes they'll have a campaign by match type, so a broad match type campaign and phrase and then exact.
Right. Also, I see sellers oftentimes make the mistake of only advertising a portion of their catalog rather than their entire catalog right off the bat. So this quote unquote unintentional product bias where they think only a few portions of their catalog will work well, and as a result they aren't identifying the actual products that do work well. So what I've seen to be successful, number one, is you should be advertising all buy box eligible SKUs, right, Mike? Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this ties back to the poll in a good way. When you talk about the remedy too of creating different campaigns, surely you want to be advertising as much as you can, but if you look back at the poll, the number one reason why you're running sponsored products is to be on page one. So something to really take away, and one of the takeaways will be setting expectations. You may not want to be top of search for a product that is been aging for 180 days. So that's something that Alex and Kathleen will get into when working through profitable campaigns. But creating different campaigns for different objectives is really important because you want placement on several different pages, not just top of search. People nowadays our shoppers are going to Amazon, going even down to page 10 to purchase products. I know I did it myself this past week. So it's really important to have placement across all different parts of Amazon.com, not just page one.
Right. Well, it's just so interesting to me because I feel like the majority of sellers that I work with is just they're just not focused on campaign structure and organization, and they kind of disregard that area for more tangible or items like ACOS or keywords. So rather than focusing on the structure and essentially the foundation of your house, right? And if the tornado comes in and breaks down your house, you want to make sure that your foundation is strong. In order to even see any return on your investment, you really need to ensure that your campaign structure is good. That's how you find the good keywords. That's how you find the most relevant information. So let's walk through the remedy, right? So if we look here, we can see, number one, right? So how do you structure your campaign successfully, right? We want you to take something out of this. Number one is you should be breaking down your SKUs by category. So Kathleen, how would you recommend that people do this?
Right, you want to put them your SKUs together with relevant products. So by shoes or a like type of product just to create relevancy to help you find those successful keywords in your data.
Right. So if you were setting up a website's navigation bar for your products, how would you structure that to make sure that customers were going to be seeing all of the products that were the most relevant to them, essentially, right?
Right. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I've seen to be successful, in terms of structure, right? Categorization, categorize your products by type. If you sell shoes, break it down by boots and then by high heels and then by sneakers. You could also do it by product line, right? So if you are, sell tons of variations of items, create your initial categorization by parent ASIN and have the campaign be all of the different child SKUs in there, right? So you can evaluate product line.
Yeah, and there could be many different ways to set up your campaigns, but the overall theme is build campaigns that align with your objective. So you can have campaigns set up the way Alex explained, which is have boots and then the ad groups be the different variation of boots. But if you have an assortment that has a very specific objective or goal, meaning your margins are varying across the board, set up a campaign for each of those ASINs. It's a little bit of legwork up front to do that work, but the results are going to be that much more efficient because you're driving a certain set of traffic to that particular product.
Right, and I think the three main objectives we see when people are choosing how to set up their campaigns are by if it's a new product launch, if it's for liquidation, or for profitability. You just want to maintain those sales at a profitable rate.
Right, so if you are launching a brand new set of raincoats, right, like you're going to have a different objective or goal than those best-selling raincoats that you have. If we look at the example, those new raincoats, the goal would be exposure. You would be more aggressive and, you would not be focused so heavily on your advertising cost of sale or your aid costs. But for those best-selling raincoats that have a totally different goal, you would want to be driving incremental revenue at a profitable rate and making money on every single one of those sales. So that's just to kind of articulate Mike's point is the objective is so important to ensure that you're able to target your products differently in different situations.
Yeah, we do ask that you ask questions through the channel here. One that relates to this is creating multiple campaigns, and the question is, does creating multiple campaigns drive up my CPC, and often does that mean I'm competing with each other, with myself? And the answer is no. Each product is going to have a different set of search. It's a different placement. You're not competing against yourself, so make sure you're diversifying your campaigns, you're spreading things out. If you have a campaign for black boots and a campaign for brown boots, they're necessarily not competing against each other. They're going to have maybe a different set of traffic going to them.
So, Mike, how does that work with setting up budgets for each of those campaigns? Should you double the budget or should you cut them in half? How would you set that up?
Yeah, so budget's an interesting conversation. I present it in a way that you don't necessarily want to be thinking about budget when it comes to pay-per-click. Amazon, they're deducting your spend out of your 14-day payment. So if your ad spend and your ACOS is aligned with your goal of, maybe it's 15% and under, then I would let my budget continue to grow. I would put much more budget behind it. Doesn't mean you're going to hit that budget, but you want to make yourself available to grow your campaigns without restricting.
Yeah, and just to clarify, CPC means cost per click. So if we're going to be talking about that, just to clarify the terminology, that actually relates super well, Mike, to the next main point that we have, which is the number 2 biggest mistake, right? So you broke down all your products, and then now we look and see, right, like campaign structure is fine, but you're not running both an automatic and a manual campaign.
I'm curious, how often do you see when you're talking to hundreds of
80% of the time.
So
yeah.
what are, I don't know if we have a poll or not set up, but what are most folks doing?
Right, I think most people are either setting up an auto campaign because it's a fast and easy way to just get going fast.
Yeah.
And then other people are just using manual campaigns because they think that's a more sophisticated way to run sponsored products. But they think auto campaigns are just an easy way to waste money. So there's not a lot of the time when people are coming in using a combination of both.
Right. It's actually super interesting because the number one complaint that I hear from sellers all the time is, I don't want to run automatic campaigns because they are just throwing away money, right? One, as long as you're actively monitoring them and are adjusting every single week based off of big data, you should be able to identify what is not working well and then adjust your product listing accordingly. But also, automatic campaigns are the only way you're able to show up on a competitor's listing under the sponsored products related to that item. That's a fact, right? If you are only running manual campaigns, you are missing out on that marketplace real estate. You can see this, explicitly stated if you download the search term report, which I highly recommend everyone does after this webinar. It's under the reports drop-down menu in Seller Central and then under advertising reports. And this will show you every single thing that someone typed into Amazon search bar and caused them to click on your ad. But anyways, you go in there and you see this, and you'll see all of these competitor ASINs that start with B0 in your search term report. And unless you want to, just eliminate that marketplace real estate, you need to run auto campaigns to get there 100%.
Well, I think another reason is I see a lot of people just run the auto for a short period of time at the beginning and then use that data to just build a manual campaign. But you really need to continue using those automatic campaigns because depending on seasonality and changes in the marketplace, your customers are going to change the way they search for things. So you need a constant data source coming in.
Right. Like imagine if something's working really well in the winter time and you only run an automatic campaign during that time. Summertime, if you're selling apparel, it's just going to be totally different. Like current events totally affect how customers are searching. You should just consistently keep those running and, focus on actively adjusting every single week, right? So one, how do we remedy this, right? So you need to create mirrored automatic and manual campaigns, right? You should be running both automatic and manual campaigns at the same time, so consistently. And then you want to consistently use the auto campaigns as a source of keyword data. So let's go into that a little bit farther, right? Because it's actually a huge point.
Right, and if you've worked with Teikametrics before, you've definitely heard explore and exploit because it's our strategy, and it's talking about a mirrored campaign structure where we're using the automatic campaign to explore what's successful and then exploit it in the manual campaign.
Right. So it's actually more beneficial for you to do this, right? Just let Amazon do the heavy lifting. Let Amazon, show your products in the automatic campaign based off of the information in your title and your bullet points and your listing, and use that search term report that I previously mentioned to identify those top performing customer search terms, right? What are quote unquote top performers? Those are things that have converted into sales at least twice in a 30-day period of time. So identify those and transition those to the identical manual counterpart as a new keyword, right? And to make your life easier, just mirror the campaign structure. Create a new raincoats automatic campaign and then have the exact same new raincoats manual campaign. The only difference is going to be the targeting type is automatic versus manual. This is the way that you can most accurately harvest the best keywords. And Kathleen, this is something that we see a lot too, right? Is when people, find new keywords using those, big volume-based keyword search tools or reverse ASIN lookups, right?
Right, and I think the issue is it's just not proven to be successful for you. So it might be a keyword that people are searching a lot, but it's not going to turn into sales unless the data says it is.
Right. So exactly. That's just not based on data at all. I mean, it's an easy way to waste money, right? If you are adding in new keywords that are essentially never proven to convert for your products. So I think just the main point about this is, one, run both auto and manual campaigns, have the structure be mirrored, explore with the auto, exploit those top performers in the manual, and use your data to make decisions, right? It's just a more sophisticated way to run your business.
So just to make perfectly clear, when you say mirror, does that mean the same exact ad groups underneath with the exact same products? Can there be any difference or exactly the same?
No, it needs to be identical, mirrored, right? The literal only difference is that one is automatic and one is manual. Really good clarification.
I think just to build on that too, and I think Kathleen, you touched on it. I mean, At Teikametrics, we've been doing this now for years, right? But I think really importantly, this is not our playbook per se. We work directly with Amazon. And so I think that's just an important reminder for the group. Again, we probably have folks that are customers and folks that are not customers, but it's not something we created on our own. We've been working with hundreds, actually thousands of sellers over the last couple of years, but we've also done webinars with Amazon, right? Amazon comes to our events. We're just aligned with their playbook. So it's something that's been tested and is tried.
Definitely. I mean, that's a fact. And I think that, that even goes to our next point perfectly, which is not using the data that Amazon is providing you correctly or even using it at all, right?
Right. People look at their Seller Central account a lot of times and look at a limited amount of data, and that's just not enough to make decisions on.
Yeah. I mean, number one is I see this so often, and this is the number one thing that bothers me is when people are in Campaign Manager and are making any decisions based off of week to date or today or yesterday, right? You always need to be looking at 30 days worth of data, 14 days worth of data, 21 days worth of data with a 3-day buffer, right? Amazon will always attribute spend and clicks immediately, but it takes them 48 to 72 hours to tell you that a sale came through. So if you're looking at week to date, yeah, that's 7 days worth of data, but it's going to be showing those clicks with no sales because Amazon has the lag period.
Right, so your ACOS is always going to look inflated. So if you make decisions on that, it'll be incorrect.
Yeah, I also see a lot, we have this in here under the mistake, adjusting bids based on limited data. I see sellers saying that they're making adjustments based off of that information and are making adjustments on a daily basis. And I don't even know how people are doing this, right? Because clearly they're not making decisions off of that big data. Some days will be better. Some days will be worse. There's always going to be everyday up and downs in the marketplace. But what you should be focusing on are the trends week over week. And you should be making the decisions off of a bigger data set.
Right, it would be impossible, and I don't think anyone has the time in the day to do those kind of equations.
Yeah, unless you're using like an automated algorithm to make all those adjustments based off of all of the decisions, there's no way. Like, you should be making the decisions once a week based off of 30 days of data to make your life easier and make the most accurate decisions. And bid adjustments aren't even the only thing that you should be doing, right? Like, I see people adding in negative keywords way too soon all the time. So they'll add in a negative keyword for something that's only been running for a week's worth of data, right? So if something's been running and has not proven to convert for your product in 7 days, that is not enough time to make a decision. So in order to remedy this, you should be making decisions, add in a new keyword after it has proven to convert into sales at least twice. Add in a negative keyword after it has been running for over 30 days and hasn't converted into a sale, right? There's all of these different things that you should be taking into consideration. You need to make sure that you're using that data, to make the best decisions, and you should be using a larger data set.
Right, and when we're talking about negative keywords, if you are finding those ones that are relevant to your product and still aren't converting into a sale, then maybe that's what you need to do is look at your product listings and maybe seeing if there's something wrong there, because if it's a relevant search term, it should be converting for you.
Well, it's really, really, really awesome if you're running sponsored ads. You should be using all of the customer search data to impact your organic listing, right? So we mentioned this before. The goal is to improve your overall organic listing so you don't have to be paying for advertisements, right? So a purchase is a purchase, regardless of where it comes from, if it's from your ad or if it's from your organic sales. Amazon will say, okay, your product is more relevant now. If someone makes a purchase or converts into a sale from your sponsored ad, it will improve your sales ranking, and that will move you up to page 1 organically, right, over time. But again, this takes time, right? Like, you should really be making the decisions and adding in those top performing customer search terms as back-end keywords. Add it to your title. Add those to your listing to ensure that the most relevant traffic is being generated towards your organic listing as well.
Right. I think you stated it, but that's exactly my thought too, is that the goal is to perform better organically and then not have to depend on advertising as much in the long run.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely a fact. I just think it's really interesting. And, what you should be doing in order to, what should you be adding in, right, to your organic listing? And I think that this just comes down to, right, like you should be identifying all of the top performing customer search terms and using this information to refine the target match type on all keywords. So this is a big mistake that I see is, when people or sellers are only using one type of keyword targeting. They'll only use broad match. They'll only use phrase match, or they'll only use exact match. Kathleen, do you see that as well?
Yeah, I think I see broad match a lot because it gets the most visibility, but there are, dozens or hundreds of search terms that will be served against your broad match keyword. So you want to find the specific search terms that are performing well to you and then refine the targeting match so you can bid on that term discreetly.
Right. So for example, right, like you might find that you can bid higher on a phrase match purple raincoat rather than the broad match raincoat because it's more relevant to your product and converts at a higher rate. So this is actually like something that I hear sellers ask a lot is what's the difference between a keyword and a search term? I think that we could clarify this here, right? So if we think about it, I think it's really interesting because, it moves us to our second mistake. Sellers are finding that top performing customer search term that maps to a broad match keyword and immediately add it in as an exact match, right? And they skip the phrase match altogether. So I think that this is a big problem simply because, think about match types like a pyramid, right? Broad match is at the bottom of the pyramid and it has the most competition, it's the most encompassing. It's typically more expensive due to the high number of, people bidding there. Phrase match is then at the middle of the pyramid and exact match is at the very top with the most targeted keywords. If you jump from the bottom of the pyramid right to the top, you're missing everything in the middle, right? So you'd miss out on all of the potential traffic that the phrase match keywords can generate. So I think we have to use an example, right? So say, you're bidding on the broad match orange raincoat, and then you decide to add it in as an exact match. If you added it in as a phrase match first, people could type in orange raincoats for men, orange raincoats for women, orange raincoats for kids, right? So as long as that string of text in that order is there, the phrase match still will present your advertisement. Perhaps you could get even more refined and more specific if you were able to continue casting the net in the manual campaigns. So Kathleen, how would we rectify that? We would move from broad to phrase to exact in that order.
Exactly. And I think just by being here and learning that is going to give everyone a big leg up in the competition because when I see sellers coming in, they are basically usually using only broad.
Yeah, or I honestly see more people just using exact match than broad, which is kind of shocking. And I think that you're just missing out on all the potential sales. So let's do another poll to get you guys more engaged. And we're kind of curious, right? Like how often, let me see, I will do this one now. How often are you making changes to your sponsored product campaigns?
So it's interesting just listening, right? We're doing this because we've learned, right? We know what sellers are doing, what they're not doing. What's the root cause, though? If someone's only doing broad, or they're only doing exact, or they're only doing manual versus auto, and not in some ways sort of following the playbook, is it because they're new? Is it because it's just too much work? Like, I'm just curious what your experience has been.
Right. I think just not having the correct education around sponsored products.
Yeah.
It's not super complicated once you learn the strategy, and then the maintenance is not super time consuming once you learn the strategy. But if you don't understand how it works, you're more apt to take like shortcuts that you hear work.
Right. I think that's literally the perfect explanation. It's just taking shortcuts entirely, right?
Yeah.
I think that education is big, and I think that there's a lot of information on the internet about best practices, a lot.
That's right. I think there's a lot of noise out there, and that's why I kind of mentioned the relationship that we have with Amazon. And I think it's important for the group is this recording will be available after the fact as well. It's got, in some ways the playbook. Give it a shot, right? So what are you seeing here from the poll?
Yeah, so we're seeing, right, so the options were daily, weekly, monthly, less than monthly, or never. So most people, so 46% of people are making changes weekly, which is really good. That's really promising. I'm excited about that. 26% are making it monthly, 15%, are less than monthly, 7% never, and 6% are making it daily. So hopefully, once we continue on, we can kind of identify, right? Like, I think everyone knows, even if you're never making changes, that set it and forget it is not a good strategy, right? Like, you should probably be spending more time managing your sponsored product campaigns, but you're probably just focusing on other more important areas of your business, right? So, you got to be running them. And I think that the number one thing that we see people make the mistake of doing is not analyzing on a weekly basis. So what's awesome is that almost half of you listening in are analyzing on a weekly basis. And I think that that's huge, right? Like, you need to make sure you're making any adjustments to your bids every single week. But I think just to articulate again the importance of big data, sellers should be adjusting their bids based off of a larger data set, right, Kathleen?
Right, and I think that plays into the next point, which is keeping Amazon's suggested bid instead of adjusting it on performance. I think obviously Amazon wouldn't make it like that easy that you could just pick the suggested bid for every search term and that would be the way to succeed. You have to look at the performance of the search term. And a lot of my customers will ask me, why is my bid below the suggested or why is it above? And you can see in the search term report why that would be. You should lower your bid if it's if it's not performing the way you want it to. So this bottom example is asking you the question, do you really want to use suggested bid if your ACOS on a keyword makes the sale unprofitable to you?
Wait, I think it's important though, because sometimes yes, right? Sometimes, you do want to, bid on a keyword if the ACOS is over 100%, but only if you're running those activity-based campaigns, right? If you're launching a new product, you're willing to take that high ACOS. Profitability is not the goal. Again, that's not a long-term sustainable strategy, right? At the end of the day, it's the dollars that are in your pocket that's going to matter after you start launching your product, right? Like once the product life cycle evolves. So I think that, how you should be treating this, right? Like number one, adjust your bids based on performance over time. And similar to the stock market, you should be investing your dollars in the keywords and ad groups that are working well. And then instead of investing the dollars in what's, not working well or is above the ACOS target, reallocate those funds towards the keywords and ad groups that are doing well. Invest heavily in what works well, divest in what does not. And would you say that that's like the best strategy?
Definitely. And I think we talked about something earlier that I think is a good point. You don't want to never use Amazon's suggested bid. It's a good starting point. Right. But you need to adjust based off of your performance.
Right. And I think it's interesting because if you look at the category level suggested bids, some categories that are extremely saturated are going to see default bid or bid range to be set at, $5. And keep in mind, right, Amazon suggested bid and bid range are calculated from a group of quote unquote winning bids for ads that are going to be similar to yours and are in your product category, but not for your products, right? So Amazon suggested bid is just that. It's suggested. You use it as your initial decision and you use that to remain competitive and you take it into consideration. I mean, I think that that's just the best way to handle it. And from there, every single week, you just make the decision to increase or decrease based on performance, right? So rather than keep it at the suggested bid and throw away dollars to get on page one, if people are clicking and aren't purchasing your product, that's actually hurting you overall, right? So like that's like a big one that's, I think, a lot of you said that your goal is to get on page one.
Yeah, I think the majority of people said their main goal was to be on page one. So that's a mistake we see a lot of people come in with is not testing the optimal ad placement for your products. So maybe sometimes you want to be on page one, but not always. If a keyword's not performing for you and it's not turning into a sale, you don't want to keep paying to be on page one.
Right. I just think it's just like such a discrepancy is that the majority of sellers that I think I talk to that come in and they say, I need to be on page one. My organic sales are tanking because I'm not on page one. I would honestly argue that because you are on page one for your advertisements, for keywords that are not working well, your organic listing never even has the opportunity to get on page one. Right? So if you're advertising your product for a keyword and you're bidding super high and your ad is on page one and people are clicking and aren't buying your product, that just means that you are not competitive enough right now to be on page one, right? Like, especially for products that are your best sellers and that are profitable already.
Right.
You might want to,
it's hurting your conversion rate.
It's just overall conversion rate, right? So your sales rate will decline, and then your organic listing will decline and go back to page 50 perhaps.
So then what's the next move, right? So let's make it real for a second. So
yeah,
people
definitely.
are clicking, it's not working. Do you go right to re-examining your photography, your title, your description? Is that where you go, or where do you go next?
I think honestly pricing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I see like either people's prices are not competitive in the industry, also just branding and overall product page optimization. I mean, one, there has to be demand for your product.
Sure.
Number two, your product page needs to look good. It needs to have the right information, beautiful pictures, images.
Yep.
I like this story that, you know, if you sell a teddy bear with one eye and no stuffing and you put it on page one, people are going to click on it and they are not going to buy that product because it does not look good, right?
Yep.
There's probably billions of other teddy bears out there for them to buy, but, you know, then you would go in and evaluate those products. Kathleen, I think you had a good story about this too, right? Like, wasn't one of your sellers, they tried to run sponsored ads and get on page one?
Right. I was going to tie that into the next slide too, which was unrealistic expectations. So I had a seller get started with me that had a new product launch and wanted to do sponsored products. So we set up all the campaigns correctly and we were maintaining them correctly. But when you clicked through on the ads, customers were clicking a lot, but getting through to the landing page and there was one photo and one bullet point to describe the product. And especially this was a product that was over $50. So if the price tag is higher, you need even more quality images and information or people are not going to trust that product and purchase it.
Right. Let's go back really quickly. I think that I just want to hone in on actual next steps, like how you remedy trying to be on page one. Number one is I just want to make it clear, right? Like, I honestly don't think the goal should be to get on page one. I don't think that that is a good goal to have when running sponsored ads. I do think that if your goal is to launch a new product or increase traffic and exposure on some of your slower moving items, then it can be a good idea to, you know, be on page one. But you know, and that's just because you're probably willing to spend the extra dollars to get the placement there, understanding that you are not going to make a profit on those specific keywords and you'll have to pay extra. But if your goal is to get the best results, right? If your goal is to be profitable, sometimes it's better to be on page 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 even. And it just goes back to creating those activity-based campaigns. You can use a campaign and set a budget per day to spend on those campaigns, knowing full well your ACOS will be high, right? That's why, especially for new product launch, I think you need to allocate the budget towards, you know, those product launch campaigns getting on page one, but it's just not a long-term strategy. You know, sometimes your ads perform better on page 2 and you actually are making money, right?
Right. I mean, I think the overall goal of anything that you do on Amazon is to improve your business, like the bottom line. So if you're wasting money trying to get on page one and the sales are unprofitable, when that's not your goal, then
I think that's well said.
That's not what's going to work.
Right. And I also think it's not for every single keyword, right? Like, you do not want every single keyword to get you on page one. You want the keywords that are converting really well and efficiently to get on page one, definitely. And I think that that's a discrepancy that we can talk a little bit more about too, because, you know, you might think that the keyword works really well. You know, say you're selling orange raincoats again, and you think the broad match keyword orange raincoat is getting you on page one and has a high return. Come to find out, you know, it's not. You don't want to be on page one for that. But maybe, you know, women's orange raincoat size 10, that is getting you on page one and you're doing awesome. So you want to make sure that you're spending the least amount to get the best return at the end of the day.
Right.
Let's go on to the unrealistic expectations, right? Like, this is number 7, and this is the final one, and I think it's the best place to end just based off of that last conversation we had too.
Right. I mean, we talked about the expecting a good ROI without listing optimization. And then the next one was expecting SP to fix your entire business. So if your product is just not desirable in the marketplace and people aren't buying it, SP is not going to be magic. It's not going to fix your business.
Right. I also think that if you sell in a really saturated category, you'll probably
Examples like what?
Yeah. So for instance, like electronics.
Sure.
Or health and supplements.
Yep.
That's very, very saturated and
Yep.
has a very high cost per click. Everyone is trying to sell supplements
Yep.
on Amazon, right? Same with cell phone cases and iPhone chargers and stuff along those lines. I mean, a lot of times you think that you're going to immediately start up sponsored products and you'll see an A cost go down to 10% immediately. And I'm just thinking, it takes time. Right? These people that have built up their businesses, it's taken them years, right? Like you just need to be realistic. We had this conversation yesterday, Kathleen.
Right. And then we hear like a lot of people come in and say, I'm going to try it for a month and see if it works. And then I'll decide whether or not it's worth it for me to go on. And it's just not enough time to optimize and then analyze whether sponsored products is the right decision for you.
Right. I mean, I think it's interesting because in the first 30 days when people start new campaigns, even if they have been running campaigns and start optimizing after 30 days, I see ACOS tend to go up. And if you only make decisions, based off of 1 month of the year, say you started a new campaign in August and that's slow season for everyone, how can you accurately say that the product isn't going to do well in December or isn't going to do well in 2 months from now, right? So it's all about, don't give up too early. Expect fluctuations during different periods of time. If there isn't demand for your product, if you're in a really saturated category, sponsored products can't save your business, but it can enhance your business and it can certainly help you grow, and it does help the majority of sellers grow. But you need to take the steps that we talked about beforehand in order to make it successful, right?
So I guess to synthesize it, right? It's like when if you're thinking about going into business, is to make sure that the product that you're looking at is unique in some way. You all would agree with that, right?
Definitely.
That'd be number one. Number two is spend the time and the energy to look at the title, the photography, the description, being very specific about that, and look at what world-class, brands are doing and say, hey, you know what, I'm close there. And then once you're there, it feels like at that point, then you get into the sponsored products game. But you've got to give yourself, at least 30 days to be able to understand what's working, what's not working. And then the recommendation is start to tweak on a weekly basis.
Right.
Is that fair?
Right.
Absolutely. And
Yep.
we have some questions coming in, and
Yep.
some of them are like, when you say listing optimization, what exactly is it that we mean, Kathleen?
Yeah.
Right, and it means your product detail page. So the content that's on there should have bullet points that describe the product accurately and give the buyer everything they need to know in order to want to purchase it, as well as high quality images. You want them to trust that they're buying a quality product.
Also, even farther right are the keywords in the back end.
Right.
Right. So I think Amazon actually came out with a new 250 keyword limit last week.
Yep.
So if you have not gone in and updated your back end keyword listings, now is the time for you to do it.
Yep.
So if you're running sponsored ads, we mentioned this before, but use those top performing customer search terms and add them into the back end as new keywords, and that will help you optimize your product listing as well. I think it's all about relevancy, honestly. You want to generate the most relevant traffic towards your listing. You can't own the customer. You can only own the customer search, right? That's the big, thing about Amazon. It is customer search. Use that for every decision that you make. And I think just be realistic about the time that it takes.
And don't underestimate the power of high quality photography. As an example, we hear time and time again, you'll see sellers that would use their iPhone as the camera, et cetera. It's decent quality, but I do think the devil is in the details. Again, just as a listener, it's like the ones that win, the sellers that we're working with that are most successful are the ones that spend the time on the devil in the details, to your point about where you're making sure you have the right keywords, the photography, et cetera, and you're spending the time in your business,
Right.
not just sitting it and forgetting it.
Right, exactly. And just that initial campaign structure, I would argue that is honestly like the cornerstone of a successful campaign, successful sponsored product campaigns. People don't spend time, breaking down their products into campaigns and then ad groups. And then unless you're running automatic and manual campaigns, your expectations will remain unrealistic, right? So why don't we just like go on to we have about 15 minutes left. There's tons of good questions coming in. We'll go through the takeaways and then we'll hit on some of those big questions for the Q&A session. So Kathleen, do you want to run through these bad boys?
Yeah, here's what we're hoping you walk away with today based on those mistakes we talked about and how to fix them. So you need to take the necessary time to structure campaigns correctly, as Alex just said. You also need to learn from your own data. So explore and exploit. This data is so valuable because it's telling you what's working for your business and what's not.
And Kathleen, sorry, specifically, when you say what data, if there's one thing or two things they do, what data set do you want them looking at?
I would say the search term report is the most important thing to download and look at.
Also, another report that you guys could take advantage of is the bulk operations report. This is under Campaign Manager and under bulk operations. And you should download that for a 30-day period of time with a 3-day buffer, like I mentioned. So what's today's date, Kathleen?
The 6th.
The 6th. So you would download it from, August 3rd to September 3rd, for example. And that will give you an entire breakdown of the performance of every single campaign, ad group, product, and keyword. And from there, you can, decide whether or not you want to adjust the bids up or down based on, the goal of the campaign. You can also see what's working well, add those to the back end along with the search term report.
There you go.
Right. I think that those are the big ones. And you want to, the data that you look at from the search term report, I would say is you want to find the top performing customer search terms. So anything that's generated, over 2 orders in the last 30-day period of time. Also maybe negative keywords, right? So identify what's not working well. See what has racked up the most spend but doesn't have a single order in the last 30-day period of time.
Right, and use that information both to optimize your campaigns and to take a look at your listings and see if you can improve there.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I think that we can even go from there, right? So you should diversify the match type based on performance. Use the search term report, as we talked about, to identify the top performing, customer search terms and add those in, diversify and transition those from broad to phrase and then phrase to exact. So you can hone in on the most relevant traffic, right? So the more and more specific you get, you pay less and less to make more and more. You want to be as targeted as possible.
Right, and then I think the next thing is just that sponsored products requires your attention, meaning there are no shortcuts. You can't just set it and forget it. That's not going to work for you because there's a lot of competition out there. So you need to be optimizing always.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, again, right, like I honestly can't reiterate this fact enough. Make informed decisions by using a long enough time period. If you're in Campaign Manager right now during this presentation and you're looking at week to date, don't do that. Like I can't even reiterate that enough. Go in there and use that 30-day period of time. And I can reiterate the point of that second report, which is the bulk operations report. So that is under Campaign Manager and under bulk operations.
Yep.
People are asking that in the questions. You want to make sure that you're downloading that for a 30-day period of time with a 3-day buffer. So you should also be looking in Campaign Manager, the campaign overview tab at the same period of time to gauge how performance has trended. Right, Kathleen?
Right. Something interesting also is I see a lot of people just look at the lifetime view in Campaign Manager. Do you see that?
Yeah, all the time.
I'm not sure how you could really make like weekly decisions on how to optimize campaigns based on the lifetime of a campaign because things change in the Amazon world so fast.
Right. Well, it's difficult because Amazon will give you the lifetime value, but they will only let you look back for 60 days worth of data. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like, if people are looking at the big picture, yes, the campaign has performed well over time, but perhaps the last 30 days it hasn't performed well. So what's going on now? What I would probably recommend is compare the lifetime with the current 30-day performance.
Yeah.
So you can see how it compares to the more broad spectrum, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's what I would probably do. And understand that it's a science, not a magic solution, right? I actually think it's an art and a science, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
I think that it's really important to make your decisions off of data, but no one knows your product better than you. You know more about your category, your listing, your bullet points, what the competition is doing, what your product catalog is. Only you can make the decision to add in a new keyword, right? Like if you say this generated 2 orders, but it has nothing to do with your product, don't add it in as a new keyword. If a negative keyword is racking up tons of spend with no sales, but it's a new product launch and you know it's very related to your product, don't add it in as a negative keyword, right? Make the decisions, you know, based off of what the data tells you, but also about what you know about your product.
Exactly. I want to make sure we leave a few minutes for some questions.
Yeah, there's some really good ones in here.
Yeah, the first one I saw, let me see, that was coming in a lot was, if we could describe the use of negative keywords in more detail.
Sure.
This customer said, for instance, they used a negative keyword in one campaign, but it appeared to apply to all campaigns.
Interesting. Yeah. So perhaps, I mean, that is not going to happen, but if you add in a negative keyword at the campaign level, it will apply to all ad groups within that campaign. So for all of you guys who are wondering, right, a negative keyword is something that you add in, and I would recommend only adding it in at the ad group level. And you would add in a negative keyword for something that does not convert into a sale for your product. So for instance, say you are spending tons of advertising dollars and are seeing no return. You decide that you don't want your ad to show up for that string of text anymore. You would add that in as a negative keyword. And always add that in at the ad group level, right? Because if you add it in at the campaign level, it just even, you know, makes the potential for your sales to be limited across all ad groups within that campaign. And I would also recommend only adding in negative exact keywords, right, Kathleen?
Definitely, because you only want to be not included for that exact term that's not working for you.
Right.
Give an example. I mean, it's
sure.
in theory it sounds great, but in practice,
absolutely, no, you're right. That's really good. So I think right. So let's just stick with the raincoats.
Yep.
If you add in the word raincoat as a negative exact keyword, people can still type in orange raincoat, raincoats for women, you know, raincoat for kids, etc. Your ad would still show up for those last 3 customer search terms if you add it in as a negative exact keyword, right? So it's that string of text, nothing before it, nothing behind it. You will only not show up for that explicit string of text.
Yeah.
If it was a negative phrase, right? So say you add in the word raincoat as a negative phrase. You would not show up for any of those, right? Orange raincoat. Nope, you're not showing up, right? Because it has to be anything, that string of text, anything before or behind it. But that string of text has to be there in the order. So that was a bit confusing. Let me reiterate again.
No, I think that sounds good to me. I mean, Kathleen, I don't know if you have color of that, but
yes, I think that makes sense to me. One thing I always have a question about is if you have a seasonal product and the search terms stop performing, what do you suggest you do then?
So say that again?
Like you have a seasonal product, something's performing for you, and then it comes up in results that it's not performing anymore because it's just not.
Yeah, it's summertime.
Pause
you're
it.
selling winter boots.
Pause it.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't add it as a negative, right? Like it just limits the potential for sales again. Mm-hmm. I think what I would do is honestly set up seasonal campaigns, right? Like you know that these products do well in the summertime, just have that separate campaign and then allocate your budget and your resources accordingly. So if you know that, you know, specific campaigns do well in the summer, just, you know, increase the budget on those campaigns so you know you're going to spend the money efficiently. Wintertime comes around, decrease the budget and, you know, reallocate your marketing expenses towards the winter campaigns. That's just an example, right? So I would never add it as a negative. It's proven to convert during a certain period of time. Seasonality is going to come into play often.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, another good one that I see in here is, you know, once you, you know, let's see, there's one about ACOS that I thought was really good. What is the average aid cost for people, Kathleen? Really, what's a good aid cost? That's a good one.
Right, and it totally depends on what category you're in, and then what kind of business you are. If it's like a category like you were talking about more that's super saturated, you can expect your ACOS to be higher.
Honestly, I would just say that you can't really, there's no good ACOS and there's no average ACOS across sellers as a whole. That's just the fact, right? It's entirely category dependent. It also should be based off of what the goal of the campaign is.
Right.
I don't think that it's about like even the category, right?
We get that question all the time.
Right.
People are just fixated on ACOS.
Oh my goodness.
I think even just to, what's the term? I can't think of the term, but ACOS is a marketing budget. No matter what business that you run, if you're running a lemonade stand or if you're running a car dealership, you're going to spend some portion of your budget on marketing. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And so whether it's 5% or 10% or 50%.
It's a bubble, right?
100%. It depends. I love what you said. It's about what are you trying to accomplish, right? If you're trying to drive traffic, you're going to spend more money on marketing, right?
And
you may make less money or make no money at all, but you're driving foot traffic.
Right, exactly.
I think it's like you got to kind of take away the mystique of ACoS.
Right. Well, it's just a line item on your P&L, right? That's literally what it is.
Yep.
You're spending a specific amount of dollars and your return will vary depending on your goals, right? Like you can't expect every campaign to have a 5% ACoS.
Yep.
That'd be amazing. I mean, everyone would be loving that as much as possible, but I mean, it's just not realistic.
It's not. I think that's the thing is people come in, it's, we talk to folks all the time. It's like, I want my ACoS lower. Well, okay.
Why? Like, no, seriously.
That's the best question in the world.
Why? Why do you want your ACoS to be lower?
Well, hey, I want to make more money. Okay, but if you don't have people buying your product, or you're not driving foot traffic, no one's buying it anyway.
Also, I think it actually is a valid concern, right? If you have really thin margins and you're a reseller, it is actually really understandable to want your ACoS to be low because you really do have to worry about the margin on your product.
Great call.
So just to clarify, right, like as long as your ACoS is beneath the adjusted gross margin of your product, you are making incremental revenue.
Yeah.
But if you're not taking into consideration every single Amazon fee, commission, return, damage, what else is there? Warehouse costs, long-term storage fees. Then you have no idea if you're actually winning or losing, which is going back to the activity-based campaigns. ACoS will vary, right? Some products will do well, some products won't. You need to take everything into consideration.
So do we have time for one more? We've got a couple of minutes, or do you want to just wrap up?
Yeah, I mean,
I think somebody just wanted you to clarify what you meant about Amazon with the 250 keyword search.
Oh, yeah. New news, yeah.
Yeah, so Amazon has limited the number of keywords that you can have in your back end. If you have too many, you will not show up in search anymore. So you can only have 250 keywords and go in there and make sure that you are under that limit, or else you will see yourself perhaps not showing up in search. I've seen a few of our sellers experience this over the last few weeks. Have you seen that, Kathleen?
Yeah, I mean, it's just really good to know.
It just is a new policy that just came out this week. So it's a good question for clarification.
Yep, 100%. So yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for your questions. If we didn't get to them, we're really sorry, but if you always can reach out to us after this webinar entirely. We want to make sure that
I think this has been great, right? Everybody, thanks for the participation. We've also, just as a nice thing, we've gotten a lot of requests for free trial of the sponsored products optimizer that we have. And this is an important thing: is we try not to sell, if you will, in the webinars. We try to make them as educational as possible. So this is not us selling; it's just an offer that's out to you. If you wanted to try the free trial, it's available to you. And kind of in the spirit of always trying to educate, we've got some upcoming webinars that you'll see here on September 20th. So we've got headline search is a big one.
A lot of people are asking about headline search in the question, so that's going to be an awesome one.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got, nearly 1,000 people that are registered for that one. So excited to have you all attend that one as well. And as Alex and Kathleen said, please bring the questions on. We're here to help in any way that we can. And thanks everybody for your participation. I know it takes some time out of your day, and we hope this is valuable. In the event that you weren't able to fully participate, we will send out the recording. A lot of good information there, folks. A lot of good information that we've been learning from sellers and work with Amazon. So Kathleen and Alex, as always, it's fantastic. It literally reminds me of a podcast. It's just so good. So you all, thank you very much. Thanks for our attendees, and thanks to the group.
Thanks
everyone.